Hello, in this next video we're going to work with UV, texture, color, bump, all that, like we did in the hand. And we're going to finish the visual completion, let's say, of all those elements on the finished body. And then we'll probably have a separate video just for the cards that I mentioned, the transparency cards for the cardboard or papercraft looking feathers that hang off here and there in the body. Okay, so let's get to the UV and start from there. All right, I just opened the UV editor and it looks like a mess. We attached the hands here, and I told you we're going to be able to save the UV shells from the hand. We won't have to recreate those. Thankfully, that was very laborious. But we also have a bunch of stuff on top of each other here that we didn't before. That is because when we created the body, it had some default UV placed on it that's covering it up. Let's pull the parts off so we can see what everything is again. So I'm going to hold one UV edge and then two shell, and then I have a whole shell here, and I'll pull this whole thing off, and then it looks like we have another UV shell here. Yours, of course, is going to look different, and whatever you have, I'm going to have these different kinds of default shells attached to the body and that kind of stuff. But the point is, under here, you're going to see your original finger UV stuff somewhere. You might have to rearrange to see. But there it all is. I'm going to shell so you can see. We have a bunch of random stuff. But underneath here, you do see. Let's select the body again. And I dim the image, but you can even see the painting. Okay, what we're going to have to do is we're going to create a new image here. We're going to create a new snapshot, but we're going to save all these UV shells. We're going to maybe pull them away from the 0, 1 space square, and we're going to have to rearrange these shells you already created for the hand and the finger. We're going to have to rearrange that among new shells for the body, legs, toes, etc. All in one, think of it, master puzzle. Putting together this giant puzzle piece now. Well, not giant, but much bigger than before. And we're going to fit everything inside the 0, 1 square, recycling the shells for the fingers. And then we're going to create a new snapshot. We're going to create a new painting. It's going to be a larger master painting. Before, I think we used maybe a map size of 12 to 1500. We're going to go larger on it. And then we're going to take this painting and size it smaller and make room for everything else, and even make room for the head. Well, getting ahead of ourselves, it's going to make more sense later. Let's just go to the next step. Okay, looking at this already, we can see the hands are pretty much done. They're colored. They all have their UV placed. We're just going to ignore that for now. We're going to replace that later in the 0, 1. But now we're going to be focused on all the rest of the body. So let's kind of go step by step with this. The first step is we're going to select the whole body that you see gray, everything but the hands, and do one massive planar UV projection. We did the same thing to the hands. This time we're doing it to the body, and then we're going to break up the edges and the parts to make them all unique shells. Just think of the whole body and the legs as another version of the hands with 5 protrusions. The body, the center, 1, 2, 3, 4, and if the head were there, 5. So we're going to leave room for the head. Okay, let's go to that next step. So I'm just going to go face, select all the faces, and select everything. I really should be in the side view, not perspective. Okay, there I've got the whole body minus the 2 hands. Let's make sure I don't make a mistake. If I make a mistake, it's going to be painful because it's really hard to correct that in the map later. So I'm going to when I select all the faces, I want to go around and see that I didn't accidentally miss or add a face here. I just want everything minus the hands selected as face. And by the way, don't worry about the darker white lines here. I should say the bolder white lines. Okay. I think we're good. I would just spin another spin around to make sure I didn't miss any faces or I didn't accidentally add any faces where I don't want them. Just the whole torso, the whole body minus the hands, and we look good. Okay, then I can go and do a planar projection. I'm going to UV planar option box, UV planar option box, and I'm going to select project from the Z axis. I know because the Z is running through it, straight through it. I can also say camera, but if I built this square on the side view plane as I did, I know I'm going to choose Z axis and then click apply, and it puts a projection over everything. And I did notice here I might have made a mistake by the bold lines. I didn't include those two. That's why I had a precaution of really making sure. So I'm going to back up. If you have any, this should all be orange in your planer. If you missed, if you go back, just undo and correct that, because that shouldn't look like that. Those two faces sticking out like teeth. It shouldn't look like that. I'm going to fix it. Just backing up and doing it again. So for me, I was just missing these two faces, which I just added. That can be a pain, as I mentioned. Okay, let's do that again. If you ever get in trouble, Command Z. And by the way, if you're hitting undo a lot, this little running man with the sprocket, it is animation, or let's say it's preferences, not just animation preferences. It's preferences for a bunch of things in Maya. There's one for undo. Make sure your undo is set on infinite. Did you catch that? That's right here in the corner. Preferences, and it has all kinds of preferences for animation, for settings, etc. And there's one time slider, all kinds of stuff, rendering. There's one for undo. Make sure that's on infinite, because often you make a mistake or you can't see stuff even when you're really careful, and you need to undo many times. So make sure that's set. And so I did undo. I made sure I got that edge, and I'm going to project planar from the Z axis again. Okay, this time it looks good. All right, so I just did that to give one massive piece to the shell like this, which obviously looks just like the CVs and the edges and resembles the body, but we're going to have to break that up into its parts just like the hand. Think of it just like the hand, in which you had to find these seams and edges and define them and unfold them and make new shells. And then we're going to all put that together as one big puzzle in this space. So we'll have to take down the size and make everyone happily fit in the square. It's going to take some time, and it's probably the most tedious part next to painting if you don't like it so much in Photoshop or whatever you choose. Anyway, the goal is to make a shell out of everything that needs to be a UV shell and fitting it here. So first, my shell I'm going to develop is going to be the torso, the center of the body, and I have to decide where a seam is going to go. Same with the hands. Let's find an area that's maybe a natural area to seam it or fold it, and this suggests right away that right there can be a line or an edge, because that line is coming together quite nice to be the edge of the jersey. So when you start to model clothes, model things coming together, whatever you have on your character, it could be dress, it could be armor, it could be adornments or jewel, whatever is hanging off the character or apparel, they're going to offer really natural places to have your UV edges. And the hardest thing to do is to make a completely naked body or hand or something and try to, hide those edges. There's something called P-text that's really good at it, but doing it with UV shells is always a little bit more of a challenge. Other technologies try to improve that. But right now we're at hand with defining where they're going to go. And I'm going to say, okay, right there would be good because that's a natural edge of the jersey to have a CV shell edge. And at the bottom, of course. Let's just start with that. All right, I have my UV toolkit right here, and I'm going to start selecting edges and then cutting them. So this could be an option, however your character is arranged, but this edge all along here, which is the bottom of the jersey, I could choose to make a separate shell out of it. I selected it all the way around like that, and I could cut it there. Okay, when I cut it, it becomes that bold line saying that's a UV shell edge. And now let's cut it along here, which will define the edge between the flesh of the character and the material of the cloth, the jersey. Make sure you don't forget an edge. You can hit 4 to make sure whatever you can see clearly it's a full ring, or you can hit the arrow to select the whole ring. Anyhow, we're going to cut there, and we're going to cut similarly on this side like that, and we can cut there. All right, now I have a ongoing separation structure here with the bold white lines, and I can continue that structure by separating out this. If I want to texture this as a flat piece, I can make a shell out of it, which does make sense because it's kind of skin, so I'm going to do that too. Before I do that, I'm going to show you one other tool. Just slip this in as it goes along for modeling. There's this, if you follow my cursor here, there's this, it looks like a cube and a hammer. You click it, it shows and hides what's called the modeling toolkit. We've been using this UV toolkit. There's also a modeling toolkit here, which some instructors using Maya like to show you right off the bat. I like to sync in new tools, just show you a couple classic ones as we're going, and go into more tools. This will be referring to this more and more. The modeling toolkit, again, it's right up here, and you can pull off a menu and have it out. This can be useful for selecting. Let me pull this out of the way. See, I'm selecting edges. It has these tools in mind for polygonal structure and modeling. Say you just want to select vertices, you click that one, or edges, click that, or faces, you click that, or you can multi, or you can click a bunch of them. I believe, and this is my preference, and right-clicking over it and just choosing vertex, face, edge is quicker than going over here. But it depends on how you learn and what you learn. But there's a lot of other tools in here which make modeling, once you understand a little bit more and you've got the primitive tools under your belt, there's more in this mesh toolkit menu, submenu, and components and tools that become really handy. And we might refer to this on and off later. Again, this modeling toolkit is usually stashed right here, and it lights up blue, and you can put it back in there, or you can tear it off. Then it becomes focused just as the UV toolkit is here. Anyway, say if I'm going to select edges, and I'm going to define edges, you can stay sort of in a mode focused on modeling. Okay, we'll return to that later. So if I'm going to select the edges of this part of the jersey and create a cut there, that seems reasonable. Make sure you don't make any selection mistakes. It's looking pretty cool. Then UV toolkit. There's so many ways, by the way, to view all these windows in Maya. Let's make a cut there first. Okay, good. We're coming along with that shell. We have different workspaces. We're working the classic Maya workspace. There's ones for just working with animation, rigging, XGen, UV editing. If we really get into this, like almost as a focus, if we had weeks and weeks just to focus only on UV, we would be specializing our interface. And this is what these workspaces do. There's pose sculpting and sculpting. Here's those sculpting tools that you don't get it from these menus. Well, I show you where to get it from the menus to begin with, so you have a good sense of navigation in Maya. Because just to use these settings and not understand, it's a process that you go from learning Maya to specialization to, there's even an expert mode. Say you've been, using Maya for a long time. There's almost nothing, no menus at all. Look what happens when you go in Maya expert mode. And you would just use the hotbox, or you'd use hotkeys that you'd create, or marking menus that you'd create yourself. So it's almost like a process of going from learning the basic shell of Maya and Classic and then moving to tools that just speed things up. So that is the way in which I will teach you. And we're going to be moving more to those tools as we understand the basic skeleton, let's say, or the basic foundation of the Maya interface. Anyway, all that is really a small digression we'll not need to go into right now. Let's continue focus on our UV. So we have this whole jersey almost cut out, ready to unfold. The lines all around. Okay, we need one more cut to split it open, and we're going to have to decide where that is, probably in an inconspicuous place, certainly not right down the middle, so we can choose one edge of this, probably where the arm would probably hide it if it came down. Let's choose this one. Just select. This is how we're going to bring it apart, and bring in our UV toolkit and cut there. All right. Now, looking at the UV editor, we can look what's happening off to the side. And we have this jersey, and it's cut. Okay, I'm going to grab a UV here off to the side of the jersey. I'm going to hold Command, right click to UV shell. And that's going to grab this new shell that was separated by the lines. We're going to pull off. And we're going to do all the construction outside this 0, 1 space. And eventually we're going to put this all together like a puzzle, as I said. Okay. Meanwhile, this is just outside our work table. Okay, just working wherever. Again, anticipating I'm going to be able to scale this and fit this on this 0, 1 space later. All right, then let's select a whole shell, and we're going to go in the UV toolkit, and we're going to unfold it. We're going to click Unfold. Now, sometimes you might get some sort of errors. Let's unfold. And it does give me an error that you might have a surface considered non-manifold geometry that be made manifold. If it sees it as any error in your surface, which if we look, and if you get an error in the surface where it's trying to unfold it, it found some part of the geometry considered non-manifold, and we talked about that. I can see that it's all quad in the surface, and if I do 5 and I do vertex face, I'm looking for any kind of n-gon error. Well, it's not there. I mean, it's not really finding that type of error. But a non-manifold is another type of topological error that can come up, and I explained it one time, I think, when the subject was topology. Let's just let it allow Maya to fix it. It has a fix possibility, and we'll talk about any topological errors that might come up later and how to fix them. Let's just go with this. Let's try it one more time. So I'm selecting all the UVs of this jersey made shell, and I'm going to use the UV toolkit, and click unfold, and it'll give me the selected mesh has non-manifold geometry, which means geometry that's penetrating each other in a way that's not considered legal in terms of polygon topology. It needs to make mono. Just click fix. In fact, you don't even have to show that warning. It will fix it right away. And there we go. So we have it unfolded as a jersey, and we can click optimize here. There's something also here in the toolkit called an unfold tool. You can sort of paint more relaxation to unfold the cloth. Imagine you were trying to silkscreen this jersey. We could have done it in a way where we do a planar projection just to the jersey. We got a really clean front and back, but we'd have lines on both sides, that side and that side, depending. Your character design or your clothes, whatever you have in the scene, is going to dictate some strategy in the way you do it. You should have some intuition by now, maybe just through trial and error, to how to peel off shells, represent them here on the UV editor, and unfolding and cutting them and unfolding them to find an ideal way. It's a bit of a science and an art form. What you should be thinking about is how to paint on this. So this type of unfold is nice in a way because it has the texture going to roll right over the sides without having a seam there, but it'll have a seam all in natural places except right here, right along the edge. But what the downfall of unfolding it that way is then it's not such an obvious flat projection for the front and back. I think it's going to work. That would be the front of the jersey, that would be the back of the jersey, but you won't have to paint them very squarely. Will have to be fitting this topology. So the more you can relax and unfold the surface, the better for the painting as it comes. But I wouldn't expect you to spend too much time on that, whatever your situation is. I'm just going to relax as much as possible and probably let it go. And of course, we can turn on this button here, which displays any overlapping areas in the purple and blue to make sure we don't do that. And it's also heat and cool stressed areas where it indicates where, if painted in the current shell shape, where things would be stretched as a texture. So this button right here shows the heat stress, that shows the overlap. That's back to just a plain old, spider web representation of the UV shell. So you can see here when it's heat stressed, you can see how it's turning blue and indicating the level of stress that is put on, that will be put on the texture when it's on there, right? So you want to even that out, where it's pulling and either pushing too much or pulling too much, giving you the temperature indication of those two. Aiming for, white, trying to get some Goldilocks zone between the two. So it's kind of interesting, but you can also drive yourself crazy by fussing too much in here and draw yourself a time limit of spending. You don't aim for perfection in your very first class here using Maya, just trying to get things done. So I have to tell myself the same lesson. I like to fuss too much. Gets a little bit game-ish when we play around with it for too long. That's again is why I'm rolling out new tools slowly to you, so you don't get lost in the woods too much, at least. Already thick woods, that is Maya. Okay, just trying to go for even tempers as possible. No pushing and pulling. Now, looking at this, how it unfolded, it's going to be a little bit hard. The numbers 33 will be stretched a little bit. I could go with this as is. It's fine. Or I could make it a little bit like flatter on a t-shirt, simply if I made one more cut. This is experimental, let's say. See, I know I have a borderline here. I have a cut there. On the other side of the jersey, if I so chose to select this edge, here to the edge of the jersey, and made a cut there as well. Cut. Okay. And then here, if I select all the UVs and click unfold again, it's going to unfold it differently. So that is maybe an easier way to paint on it. And then you could optimize it to, smooth it out and have a better surface area to paint that. But it does seem to take up, a little bit more surface space with the hole in the middle, which either way you're going to have to work on. So I'm going to stick with this type of unfold that I've made and just paint it as sort of a shell going around. Okay, let's put that out of the way for the moment, the jersey, and work on the other parts. Plenty of other parts here. Okay, the arms, the rest of the body, etc. So here, there's already a cut there. No need to make that another cut for a shell. Just work on the different parts. So if it wasn't, then I would put a cut there. Wouldn't need to in this case. Next, I think I would cut out the leg. It seems to invite itself perfectly right here. Make a cut there. Cut off one leg. And then we'll have that leg separated here, so we can choose its UV, control to UV shell, and then we pull off a leg. Guess we could do that to the other leg while we're in the location. Now you're probably thinking, if I modeled the creature or whatever we're making in halves and then doing half the work and duplicating it to the other half, why can't we do it to the UV as well? You can. That's one approach you can, but there's also the opportunity to do some built-in asymmetry to a character, and you have overall control doing it as once. It is not worked in. It's not baked in the workflow very easily to do UVs that way, and there's other applications we can use and plugins to better do that. But the answer is, at the moment, we're just going to do the whole body at once as a treatment for the UVs. Okay, we have the other leg, and we're going to cut it. Boom, that's cut off in the UV, and pull that leg off to turn into a shell next. What I'll do next is separate this part of the leg from the foot, probably right there, and cut that right there, and cut it there. So then I can pull the foot off and treat it separately. Okay, I'm going to pause and do some of this because you already know how to do the fingers. That's the similar process to fingers that you did on the hand. So I will work a little, work ahead and pause and come back. Well, just showing you quick, if your legs are skinny or are thick or whatever the case in your character, I'm going to put a seam maybe toward the back of it to split it apart there. It's running the full length of the leg there and cutting it and fold it there. It's a nice shell. Okay. And it's good. And we'll do the other leg and then the feet. Okay, there, I'm going to fold the other leg can start to puzzle, piece them together where it'd be amenable to paint on them together. Now I'm going to separate out the toes. I'm going to choose one ring like that. Cut there. Like that. Give a cut there. Let's slice this all apart. Let's cut there. And the rest of it should kind of take care of itself. Of the foot, I mean. See, now we have these 3 finger pieces. Truly chicken fingers. All cut apart from each other. Then if we want, I can define a line on the bottom of each one to have hidden a seam. So unfold nicely there too. And I'm going to do along all the rest as well. Let's keep cutting. One more. Okay, now just unfold each one. Just grabbing all the UVs of each finger and UV toolbox, click unfold of each. And they look definitely more flat and paintable. Or here I could cut right there if I want. Actually, that's not too bad. Just taking up maybe a little bit more space than I want. So it's highlighting over the areas, turning red. This is also indicating where a shell is, just selecting faces and rolling over it. See, this whole piece is a shell. This is a shell. It's highlighting here too, where my shells are. This exaggerated red field. So it's looking pretty good, except maybe I'll split it here. I don't want to have a separate shell for that. That's way no one's going to see that. That's on the bottom. I actually don't really care what I do. But since it's so hidden, maybe it's not going to be in an animation or a shot. I'll just make one more split right there. Just to cut it maybe there. Okay, and now try unfolding it again. And I'll have 2 separate shells. For convenience of painting. Let's arrange this, or I should say pre-arrange, so it makes more sense. I know that the toenail's right here, right? At the tip. So let's arrange as we go these shells in a sensible way that we know how we're going to paint on them later. If we're really trying to utilize the space, we could do an arrangement like that that's wasting no negative space. So we have a lot to puzzle together. Just try to remember what's what so you know how to paint, what to paint, etc. Okay, we'll come back to that later. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other foot, of course. This whole kind of boneyard is coming together slowly but surely to describe every part of the figure. And we're going to pre-arrange before we arrange over here. And I'm going to take care of this foot next, just like that one. Let's say, by the way, in the bottom of one of the feet, this little shell got detached. It can happen, or a mistake can happen while you're defining edges of shells. Teach you along the way. We have in the toolkit a sewing tool, and I know that these 2 edges are coming together, and I want to put them together in the shell. It's more getting to advanced UV editing, but if you use the sew tool and you can define the edge right here, the ones nearest each other will highlight red. There's no reason those need to be separate shells, so this doesn't need to be separate shells. So I could put them together just by using the sew tool, adjusting the brush size with B, and then painting, and those then become welded together as one shell, just like that. So that's a little bit tricky because you have to be oriented and know what edge is facing what edge to sew together. But imagine it like textiles. If you have one piece of cloth cut out, it should be the same edge of another piece of cloth cut out. And if you want to put them together using the sew tool, you can, and it will stitch them, identify which edge is which, and stitch them together. I should say sew them together. It's like putting the edges permanently together. It's not a temporary thing. So it did work on this because I already had adjacent that shell. Now this is making sense. As you work much more in the UV editor, all that will kind of fall more into place. A little bit too premature at the moment. But I just did want to show you the sew tool. Continuing to arrange everything in the UV, a little off to the side, getting ready for the big puzzle put together. I still have all the rest of this to do. Look at it in the scene as is. If I go to UV, let me show that in the marking menu a little. Hold right click, go to UV, go to UV shell, and that's where that red comes up to identify. You don't even have to be looking in the editor. You can identify what the UV shells are by rolling over them, and they highlight up. So remember, shells for the fingers are individual. It's very convenient to see where all the shells are. And we have more to cut out, and we're almost there though. I'm just going to find an edge to unfold the trunks, I guess, or his trunk of his body to be a separate shell there. And I could do that cut and put another cut here if I want to have two sides of it. Or I can do like the jersey where there's just one. Let's just try one there. And cut. And two, UV shell. Let's just see how that peels off and unfolds. Just selecting everything and clicking in the UV toolkit, unfold. And that looks pretty good. So this will be the top edge of the trunks. That will be one smooth paint over. Again, that's one way to unfold it. We could have done a planer if we wanted really flat look to this with seams on both sides. I opted for more of the jersey one where he had one seam. It's really going to depend on your clothing again, what you have. Okay, starting to put the pieces. We have the arms left and that little piece right there to do, and we're about done. Okay, this is maybe a tougher choice. If we want to unfold the arm as is, it's going to look like that with no seam around the cylinder of the arm. But that might stretch things and look kind of stressed as it's getting this very stressed looking result. It might be better to, just like the finger, define a line and do our best to match the edges of the seam. Let's do that. We are going to try to select an area. Probably it's going to fall under the arm when it's closed. It's probably most hidden. So we're going to grab an edge on the underside of the arm right here that runs through. That's not often seen. Let's try this one. Right there. And you'll find a place on your mesh that you think is a good hidden seam location. Make sure you have everything, and then of course cut. Then unfolding, much nicer, much more paintable result. So that's the left arm. Doing the same for the right arm. Going and finding that edge that's most under right there. Under the radar, so to speak. And right up to the hand, and good, cutting it there. And here's our UV. Let's go to shell and unfold. All right. And we just have this little piece left. And I just clicked unfold to unfold it. And that's this piece right here on top. Okay, so we have everything shelled out, let's say. Everything shelled. Now we just have to put all these pieces in the 0, 1 space. And what we have to decide here is what's most important. We're going to resize shells. What is going to use the most pixels? What is going to be the biggest size that we need for painting? Well, we have a head coming in. So that needs to be regarded. And we have hands, which we did a close-up of, and here we have hands taking well. Certainly this needs to be shrunk down. And the legs are really skinny, so maybe long. You can lay along the bottom. And the whole jersey, that's a big part of the model. So the jersey part should be kind of big. The arms part should be kind of big. So you have to do your real estate size here of all these shells and give room for everything and everybody and all the shells to come in this space. So this is just going to take time to arrange. First you pre-arrange and then you arrange here. So I'm going to work on this and cut back. Now I'm going to turn off this image, and it's going to mess up the hand texture for a bit, but I don't want you to be distracted by it. I'm just going to go in the image and turn off the display, because these are going to, of course, be way too large to be taking up that whole 0, 1 space. So they're going to go way down in size. Oops, forgot some of it. And then I'm going to work and piece some of these in there as I resize stuff. And yes, I could have done one leg and the bisection of the body, the UVs, one time and mirrored it over to the other to get more UVs there, so double the work. But I knew that the midsection line that had to be done after the mirror. So I just went ahead and did everything together. If that does make sense to you, that is if you're wondering if we have to do the hands twice. No, of course, because we already modeled it and mirrored it over or duplicated it over. So that would be the same deal in the legs or any other symmetry object had we had the UVs done already, and that would be half the work. But I wanted to show you how I deal with the whole centered body. So there are shortcuts to use. As I put this together, in your mind you're probably thinking what the shortcuts are. There must be a way, and there is. There's always a way to make it a little bit easier. If this is first time learning, it just helps to get the practice. This part, bit tedious. It's like making some type of quilt or puzzle. And once it's over, everything falls into place quite literally, as you know, with the fingers, and you just have left to paint. Just finding a nestled little place for everything. Have it make sense. So the biggest part of the body should be the biggest shells. If the hands are small to the body, the hand shells I'm finding a section here for. Okay, it's coming together like a big puzzle, trying to limit all the empty spaces. I'm leaving this space for the head that's to come. So he has a big head, so it's going to be a massive shell here taking up this space. So maybe before it goes 0.6 to 1, I want to keep clear of that area as close as possible to leave room for the shell to come for the head after I model. Of course, that's in the last project, but just to prepare for it, I'm going to massage these shells a little bit lower and still trying to maximize the filled areas. Another advantage of having a shell for each hand is if I had a detail on the right hand that's different from the left hand, or the fingers, maybe there was a scar or a hole or a tattoo or something, this UV that's been doubled describes both hands as both hands light up. If you wanted to save time to mirror one set of UVs over on the same set, it does say it's overlapping, and whatever texture goes here, it's precisely the texture is going to go on the other hand. So if you have a nicely asymmetrically painted model, yep, you're going to need shells for both bilateral sides, and it's going to get filled up like this, a puzzle. Okay, this is not bad. We're close to take a snapshot. We can wiggle this in, eventing the vacuum spaces to maximize the shell area, but we're leaving the area on top for the head that's coming in. So that's going to wrap it up. I'll just do a little bit more nip and tuck and poking around here, and then I'm going to do a snapshot and get ready to make a painting.